Well, welcome everybody to this APMP panel session today. The title of the session is Future Ready Your Content, Processes, and Technology with Microsoft 365. My name is Ray Mehring. I'm the CEO of Chorus Software, and I'm delighted to have with us today two guests who will be joining me on this panel so that we can get their perspectives on how Office 365 has enabled them in this new world, or how migrating to Office 365 has enabled them in their proposal processes. Firstly, let's start with yourself, Jo. Thank you very much for joining us. Would you like to do an introduction?
Sure, Ray. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jer Thor. I'm a manager of our M&BD technology systems here at Hogan Levels. I've been doing this now for several years and am actually a Chorus client as well. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, some of the things that we're doing on that front within our firm.
Very good. Thank you for being with us, Jer. Olivia, great to have you with us as well. Would you like to just give us an idea of who you are?
Thanks, Ray. Well, my name's Olivia Hardy. I'm the founder of Catalytic Consulting and also a proposal writer. So I do a lot of work with Chorus and have been a Chorus user for a very long time.
Very good. Thank you for that introduction. Well, we appreciate your perspectives. Let's get straight into some questions here. The first question that I have for you is, how has the pandemic personally affected your roles and your day-to-day work? Maybe, Olivia, we can start with your view on that question.
Well, I'd say that definitely there was an initial slump in activity at the beginning of the pandemic. I think a lot of unknowns and uncertainty and how it would impact businesses. So while that's still the case today, it seems that a lot of businesses are transforming the way they work and adjusting to this new normal in the COVID era as best they can. So that means people are working remotely a lot more and also having to invest in the right tools and technology to make it possible to do that well. So there's a lot of digital transformation quite rapidly, in fact, in many areas. And since I work in that space, work has definitely picked up and there's an increased influx in RFPs. Yeah, definitely.
Great perspectives. Thanks. What about yourself, Joe? What have you seen with your day-to-day work and its effect from the pandemic?
Yeah, I would say generally for our team, my team is a global team. And so we haven't seen a huge impact there on the day-to-day work. What I will say is we are seeing from a proposal perspective and a content perspective, I think there's a lot more, I wouldn't say time, but there's definitely a lot more focus with regards to content. We've had quite a number of people reach out to us in the past several months with regards to, oh my goodness, I've got to look at my content. What can I be doing around my content? And so that's definitely something for me and my team that I've noticed an uptick in. But generally, as far as the day-to-day, I mean, we all work remotely. We're a global team, so we're kind of used to it. And it's actually nice to be able to do that with some of our other colleagues as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Interesting perspective there on the focus on content during the pandemic, maybe taking an opportunity to get that content right there. Let's spend some time talking about how teams can get better organized, how they can structure content for proposals and responding to RFPs. Now, Joe, at Hogan Lovells, you're migrating to Microsoft 365. So we really appreciate your perspective as you're going through that migration there. Can you share with us how you've been able to approach your taxonomy, your content classification, some of those elements of your move and your structuring of content?
Yeah, this is really timely because we've had Chorus now, obviously the system that we're using for a few years, and we're having to revisit that, right? We're having to revisit how are our users using that content? What did we have established before that wasn't working or was working, and what do we need to adjust? And so we're going through that process now, and I think one of the biggest things that we've gotten feedback from our users, and that's the other key thing, obviously, is listening to your users and what they're actually sharing and how they're actually using the system, but it's also how they're actually searching, right? And I think that's the biggest thing that we struggle with is everybody searches for content slightly different. Everybody filters and categorizes content slightly different. And how do we get that to a place where it's intuitive for users if they're going to go into the system and they're looking for content? What is it that they're looking for, right? And really focusing on those terms and ensuring that it's consistent, right? And I think all firms or organizations where you have what they call a marketing stack, you have various marketing applications or various technologies that you're using, is ensuring that that taxonomy carries over from one system to the next. And that I will definitely say that's a struggle that we've had to deal with. It's ensuring that our taxonomies are consistent, not only from a content perspective, within the way we search and organize content, but also then how do we take that content and put it in another system or share it with another system, or be able to not work so siloed. And that's definitely something that we've been really focusing on and having quite in-depth conversations about. As I'm sure you all know, one team within an organization may define something slightly different than another, is ensuring that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, having like a common language or a common content structure across that marketing stack there. Well, we look forward to helping you with that, Jer, as you move on to the next version of the platform. Olivia, you've done a lot of work around that yourself, structuring content. Do you have a perspective you'd like to share on that?
Well, I couldn't agree more with taking a user-centric approach here. And really one of the toughest things is getting everybody to agree and get buy-in for your taxonomy and how it should be organized. So what I found is that one of the best ways is to take an iterative approach where you create a mock-up or a rapid prototype, and then you present and test it. First with key stakeholders, and then perhaps with a group of users that represent different areas of the business, different skill levels, different levels of experience, and then see how they interact with it. And if it's intuitive, can give them a few searches and tasks to do. It doesn't have to be the full content, but just a little subset, and then iterate on that. You can take the feedback on board and then improve slowly. But it really has to be successful. You have to focus on the search experience. What are people looking for, like Joe said, and how do they go about doing that?
I like that evolutionary approach that you're talking about there. Rather than trying to start with this big taxonomy, start smaller and build out. And there's several features on the Microsoft 365 platform that allow you to take that approach, that more evolutionary approach, and adjust things as the business grows or changes. Olivia, have you seen any of those features that you've worked with in Office 365 or Microsoft 365 that have facilitated that approach?
Absolutely. So if you're on Microsoft 365, then you can use the term store that comes with SharePoint Online, and that allows you to create one or more. You can in fact have multiple classification schemes in a hierarchical fashion, and you can then use those terms to label and categorize your content. So the nice thing with that approach is that it allows you to label the content across multiple dimensions. So some users familiar with the proposal process, they might look for content for the executive summary, but a sales user might look for similar content, thinking in terms of product or maybe service that the client has requested. So they're thinking in a completely different space. They wouldn't go look under executive summary. Well, with SharePoint Online and the term store and managing your content there with Microsoft 365, you can label across all those dimensions. And then it's just a matter of being able to check a few boxes to get to the right content. So it really helps users navigate the content, discover great content to use, and find what they need really quickly.
That's some excellent practical suggestions there, Olivia. Thank you very much. Obviously, having content in a centralized content environment is one thing, but content's never static. It needs to be updated and changed constantly. What have you seen, Joe, in terms of proposal content life cycles? How have you implemented that in the past to make sure that that content is being reviewed regularly and is approved content?
Yeah, so in prepping for this, I was thinking about this, and to be honest, we still struggle. it's not an easy thing to do. So if somebody's got this down and they're doing a great job with this, I'd love to hear the magic formula. As I mentioned, we used Chorus, and Chorus obviously has workflows that are built in place, and we've implemented those. We actually, the way we use the workflows is probably a little slightly different than what some other clients do, because we have two processes in place. We have one where an actual person is going in and reviewing and making the updates. And in some cases, we have maybe a manager or higher level up going in and approving those updates as well. So we have a two-step process with regards to the approval. And in some cases, it may be one and the same. And the workflows are great, and it's a great way to remind users, but it's not a catch-all. And some teams are really good at it, and other teams just, it's kind of, well, it's not priority for me. I've got other things that are boiling right now that I've got to take care of. So in addition to using the workflows, one of the things that we've implemented is my team will just do a semi-annual review twice a year. If we need to more frequently, is just go through and review. I know some teams have content people. We don't have that. Our practices in our industries are the people who are reviewing the content and making those updates. So our team actively reaches out as well, and we try to help encourage that, right? So we push that along and we say, okay, if you need to change the life cycle of the review, sometimes we have it set up for 6 months, and maybe it's not a 6-month review, let's change it to an annual review. So we work with the teams to figure out what's best for them, and we also push them and encourage them to do that. So it's not by any means like, oh, the workflows work great and everybody's doing what they're supposed to. There's still a lot of encouragement, a lot of pushing on our side that we've got to do to ensure that that information is being recycled, being reviewed. And in some cases we'll help with that, right? If it's a bulk process, obviously on the back end as administrators, we can push things through without them ever having to touch anything, right? Hey, we've looked at it. None of these things need to be updated. Can you just help us push that through? So the team is here to help and try to make things as easy as possible. But it's still a struggle. It's not something that I think we find is always automated or people are constantly in there doing things. So it's still a lot of reminders.
Yeah, and we see that across the customer base, that there is still the need for kind of those prompts to come through, and people have so much email today, right? It's difficult to pick that up. One of the techniques that we've seen really work well is kind of an in-flight update. If you are the owner of the piece of content and you're the one using it inside of a proposal, making those updates on the fly and pushing them back, that can work, but it requires a really good set of permissions there as well. Thank you for that perspective, Joe. What do you have to say on this matter? Olivia, you've implemented many of these workflows as well in your time. What have you found that works?
I think one of the key things that Joe has touched on is planning your workload, and people coming and saying they're too busy, changing the life cycle. What I found is that really, if you are able to you don't want to drown your people in too many email notifications, because it just becomes noise and people ignore it. So what you'd ideally want to do is have at least a monthly digest of, here's the content that's coming up for review. Let us know if you need help with it, and you've got X amount of time to do it. But then that at least allows you to prioritize and plan the workload a little bit better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Having maybe less frequent updates, but ones that give you a summarized view around that. That's
Absolutely.
an excellent perspective. Yeah. Let's move on to integration. Joe, you mentioned the marketing stack and how important things are inside of that marketing stack today. What are some of the opportunities you see for integration around that? Maybe reporting across those platforms as well. What works for you guys?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways. I mean, when you're looking at integration, you can take a look at what we're pulling into the system, right? Whatever system you're using. Again, we use Chorus. So what information are you pulling into the system? What information are you taking out of the system, right? And so there's definitely two ways of doing that. And we've started to take a look at when we first launched this system is really just what can we pull in? What are we pulling into the system? How can we help our users make their journey a little bit easier? What do we already have available, right? But in addition to that, we're also capturing a lot of good information in our proposal system, right? And a lot of that information can be used to push out. So now we're getting to that phase where what can we do to also push the information out of the system into our CRM system, into our experience management system? Where else can we utilize some of this information? And the way we use Chorus at Hogan Lovells is it's really a marketing tool, right? So there's not a lot of visibility outside of that. And so we're also taking some of that, and I think, one of the really nice things about Chorus is that it's a SharePoint platform in the back end, right? A lot of firms are using SharePoint. It makes it very easy to share information, push information through your SharePoint platforms. So we're actually doing some of that today as well. We're pushing emails out. We're pushing things onto various intranet pages. So there's a lot that you can do. And our next phase that we're focusing on is actually into other technologies, right? What can we do as far as pushing it into other technologies? But as far as already using a lot of that in the SharePoint environment, we're actually doing that. And it's actually really great because we can share a lot of our pitch data, a lot of our pitch information with our lawyers who normally wouldn't have access to Chorus and be able to run searches. They can actually, we expose some of that data onto our intranet pages, and they can actually go in and take a look at some of that data. And it's very easy to do, right? It's very easy to do. So I think that's, those are some of the things that we're doing from a Hogan Lovells standpoint.
Yeah, those are great points. And obviously that integration requirement just continues to grow as more and more systems join that stack there, and you're trying to get this more holistic view of it. Thank you. Olivia, part of integration is workflow, right? It's really key that all plugs together well. And Joe mentioned SharePoint and how those workflows inside of SharePoint allow data to be shared. What have you seen that works from a designing and building workflow perspective when it comes to Microsoft 365?
Well, the wonderful thing with Microsoft 365 is that there are so many options available to create workflows on SharePoint Online. SharePoint workflows in the old days used to get a really bad rep because they were a nightmare to build and test, and you pretty much needed a developer to get anything working right. And it was a real nightmare to try and customize and change as you evolve. With the Microsoft 365 stack, you can turn on default approvals that ship with SharePoint Online that can take information from different systems and push to other systems, or for approvals and cyclical reviews. You can use third-party workflow applications. There's a ton of them to choose from on Microsoft AppSource, or you can even build your own, which I think is really exciting with Microsoft Power Automate. There's no coding required. You can do it to your exact business requirements, including tailoring your email notifications. And then also having the ability to report on all of this, I think, is also quite key, and having some visibility into what's coming up, where are the bottlenecks. You can hook up anything you create with Microsoft's Power Automate to Power BI and other analytics tools. And Power BI works incredibly well. And you can have the dashboards and then the in-depth reporting where you can actually go into the data when you need to.
That platform is incredibly powerful. It's probably why Microsoft's now calling it the Power Platform. But Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps gives you a high level of personalization around your business processes there. Brings me to the next point, which is discussing how experts are critical to the process of managing content, the process of building proposals and pitches, and probably even more so in organizations with the pandemic and everybody working remotely, less time to get together in a boardroom and physically see each other and talk about things. Joe, from your point of view, how are subject matter experts getting involved specifically in that review process there and updating or contributing content towards a growing central repository?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit earlier about how we have our workflows set up over at Hogan Levels, and I think a lot of that, what we already have in place, is really focusing on the subject matter experts to go in and take a look at it. And part of the nice thing about doing that is you don't have to have several types of workflows in place. It's pretty straightforward. That subject matter expert is going in, reviewing that content, may need to reach out to lawyers or partners for review or feedback, but because they're the subject matter experts, it's a quick reach out, right? You don't have to go through multiple people, you don't have to go through multiple channels, get various approvals. It makes it very easy to go in and update the content. In addition to that, they're also the people working on the pitches most of the time, right? And so they have an awareness and a sense of what their partners, what their practices are looking for, the work that's being done. And so they can go in and feel pretty confident about making those updates. And again, you're skipping a lot of in between multiple channels, the kind of the middleman to the middleman to the middleman type thing. So it makes it really easy. I think it makes it a lot quicker to get things pushed through in an approved state.
So that's really the in-flight type scenario there, where the person that's updating the proposal also knows whether the content is up to date themselves and feels confident in making that update. Yeah, that's a really powerful capability there. And maybe that leads on to the next point of discussion. And Olivia, if you can chime in here, what are some of the features that you see in proposal management tools that allow those subject matter experts to get involved, or others to be able to contribute towards that centralized repository of content?
Absolutely. Well, as part of the proposal process and responding to an RFP, you'll probably need to invite subject matter experts to come and help out and respond to questions. So an interesting thing to do is to, in fact, build in as part of your proposal process at the end, once you finish submitting your RFP, going through it and identifying all those pieces of content that you were not able to find as part of your reusable content library. What's the new stuff that the subject matter experts have given you? What has been improved upon, and maybe updated, and then going in and adding that back to a content library. So Chorus, for example, has a great feature that helps with that, where you can literally go through the proposal. You can genericize it. You can put in something called smart fields. So these are placeholders so that you can very quickly populate it with all the right customer information, like the customer company name, and then just go and add that in a few clicks to your content repository as a new document. There's a feature in Chorus called the clip, which is one of my favorite features. I use that a lot.
Thanks for highlighting those features. We've spoken a bit about migrating content to Office 365 or Microsoft 365. Do you have any tips that you'd like to give us, Olivia, on how to be able to do that? What are some of the ways that you would go about a content migration? I know Jura is going through this process herself right now.
Yeah, well, content migration can be very daunting, especially if you have a lot of content. So it's interesting to see, in fact, if you've got access to that data, how much of that content is actually getting used in practice. If you have any insights or metrics, and then perhaps maybe you don't need to migrate everything. Maybe you can choose the different parts. And then again, I'd recommend an iterative approach. So maybe divide the content into big buckets, and then migrate one bucket of content at a time. That allows you to refine just a small part of your taxonomy, make sure everything's working all good, everybody is comfortable, and then the next iteration is a bit faster. The nice thing about organizing and managing your content in Microsoft 365 and in SharePoint Online is that you can start with a really loose content structure and then evolve it over time. So you could use folders if your user base and you like using folders. You can start with a small set of terms and then expand those. So the trick here is to try not to over-engineer it too early on, because everybody's got a different way of thinking about content and how they find it. So rather take an iterative approach.
Makes a lot of sense. Anything you'd like to add there, Jo? I know you guys are going through this right now, but anything you've picked up as you've been considering your migration?
I think, I mean, the other thing I was thinking about, and something that we haven't actively been using, is obviously within Chorus, you can actually track what content is being utilized and not utilized. So I think that's another important thing, where if you can track how often your content is being used, what's being used most often, that's probably the stuff that you want to move over or migrate immediately. That's the, you know, the stuff that everybody is going in and using, and that's the stuff that you probably want to focus on, right? Given the usage of it. So something that we haven't used a lot, but definitely something I think we'll start looking at, and as we start moving content over, is to think about what should and shouldn't be moved over. You know, there's pieces of content that nobody's using or nobody's going in and updating. Why are we still having it in the system?
Yeah, that's critical. It actually relates back to one of those earlier points about content reviews as well. If you know what people are really using, you make sure that those are the pieces that are getting the attention and the review and are being migrated, instead of just this scheduled process to run on everything that somebody's got their name to. So really understanding the usage profiles around content is critical. It leads us on to a discussion around reporting, and how important reporting is in the proposal process, in the content adoption process. What tools do you like using today, Jer, at Hogan Lovells? What are you seeing as key reporting elements as you move forward?
Yeah, so we have an on-prem setup here at Hogan Lovells, and we actually have worked with our internal IT team to create Power BI reporting. And I know earlier we had talked about taxonomy, and we talked a little bit about searching, but the taxonomy is also really important for reporting. So as you're thinking about taxonomy, think about not only searching, but reporting as well. And that's something that we had done previously. Jumping onto the Chorus platform with our other platforms and our homegrown platforms is really looking at reporting, but we're having a rethink about that as well as we're moving to 365 and kind of shifting gears. Is what do we need to do from a reporting standpoint? And reporting is another one of those that we're coming to find everybody interprets data and statistics very differently. So is to being very clear in understanding how we're doing reporting, the tools you have in place for that. Like I mentioned, we're using Power BI. We have a team in-house that has been able to take the data that we capture within Chorus around pitches and pushing it out through Power BI via dashboard. We actually have sort of like an Excel setup as well, where you can filter easily through Power BI and say, I want to slice this data a very specific way. So there's definitely reporting. And as I think, as especially with the pandemic right now, you're seeing a lot of people ride on numbers, right? Numbers are important, data is important. And so we're seeing a lot of that. We're definitely seeing a lot of interest from our partners as well. So it's a big focus for us, and I'm sure it's going to be a big focus for a lot of firms in the upcoming years around pitching and numbers and how we're doing or how you're doing as an organization.
Yeah, I love that point about thinking about your reporting taxonomy as well. That's such a critical point there, bringing that perspective into not just the content, but also the reporting, so that everybody gets to benefit from those reports and works with a common set of metadata structures, if you want to put it that way. One of the powerful things about Power BI, as you've expressed, Jer, is that it can tap into multiple systems, right? And you can pull various elements together into one report. How have you seen this work, Olivia, in your experience of working with Power BI?
Well, Power BI, the wonderful thing about it is that it is quite similar to Excel. If you've got experience working with pivot tables, then you can probably work with Power BI. And it has a fantastic library of pre-built connectors, I think in the hundreds, and then allow you to very easily connect data from multiple places, as Joe was saying. So when it comes to managing your content in Microsoft 365, you've got your sales activity perhaps happening in Salesforce.com or Dynamics 365, and then you've got your proposal creation process going through a platform like Chorus. You're able to connect all of those different pieces to give you a full and complete picture. And you can very easily create your own dashboards and visuals. The nice thing with it as well is that it's because it feeds all that data, you've got the visuals, but then if you need to drill in and the data is giving you a signal that there's maybe an area that you need to pay attention to, you can actually go and drill into the data and address the issues as they come. So it's incredibly powerful. I found that especially reports around how collaboration is growing, how search terms that people are searching for that return no results. It also will tell you about the content that people are using, how well people are updating content and following workflow processes. So it can be very powerful. So Power BI is definitely one of my favorite platforms.
Sounds like the way to go. Olivia and Joe, thank you so much for your practical suggestions there. Thank you for keeping it real around the challenges that there are in this world, in this process of proposal management. We certainly take away from that the need to evolve on things like content structures, reporting structures, to not overinvest maybe in a lot of emails flowing around on content reviews, and then to really focus in on reporting and how those analytics can help you to build a better process around your proposal management. We really appreciate your time, and we appreciate you being part of this panel today. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to receiving some of your questions in the chat window and to responding to some of those questions as well. Have a great day.